American University in Cairo. Yeah, thank you. I don't know, the audio is a little off. Oh, okay. Dr. Bali is a professor of practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo, and she holds a PhD in education from the University of Sheffield in the UK. She is widely recognized for her work in social justice and open and online education. She's the co-founder of Virtually Connecting, which is a grassroots movement that challenges academic gatekeeping at conferences. She's a co-facilitator of Equity Unbound, which is an equity-focused, open, and connected intercultural learning curriculum. This work has also expanded into broader community initiatives such as continuity with care, socially just academia, collaborations with One He, and My Fest, which is a 3-month professional learning journey. Her contributions have been widely recognized. She was a fellow of the London School of Economics Higher Education blog in 2024. She received the 2023 Open Education Awards for Excellence Educator Award and was named one of EdTech Magazine's 30 Higher Ed IT Influencers to follow in 2023. On a more personal note, I've had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Bali in person. She's as kind and as generous as she is brilliant. I've also attended her Equity Unbound sessions, which have been incredibly meaningful spaces for learning and connection. Through them, I've had the chance to engage with very thoughtful and inspiring scholars from around the world, which really speaks to the kind of community that she cultivates. We are very fortunate to have her with us today in what I'm sure is going to be a very fun and interesting interactive session. I think it's like dinner time for her, so very nice of her to join us right now. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Maha Bali.
Thank you, Delia, for a lovely introduction, and thank you all for having me. I had technical issues, so I am right now on my phone, but I am going to be on my laptop in 1 minute, inshallah. Just waiting for the Zoom to open, and I will leave the phone over there. Just hang on a second while the audio goes crazy when I'm logged into both, and then enjoy your pizza until Did the pizza arrive? I hope it arrived.
Yes, finally. So go quickly get some pizza while we get set up here.
I should be okay now, hopefully. Can you hear me well now? I'm on my laptop? Yes? All right, awesome. Thank you all for making the time today. I always start my sessions by saying Assalamu alaikum. Just means peace be upon you, and it works for any time of day. So I don't have to worry about the difference in time zones. It is 6 p.m. over here, and I know it's lunchtime for you. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share my slides in the chat, but then Dalia and her team can share it with everybody else later. And I'm going to be using Mentimeter to be able to interact with both people in the room and people who are joining virtually so that I can capture everything together. But of course, virtual folks, feel free to use the chat if you want as well at any time. All right, so starting the slide about approaching the whole critical AI literacy conversation from a lens of compassion, I do want to say that that photo of a picture of a cute looking Sphinx is my daughter playing with AI a couple of years ago. She used DALL-E and she said, I want a Sphinx, but cute. And this is what came out, and I want to print it in 3D and sell it. It's so cute. And I know that you had a land acknowledgement in your slides, and in Egypt we don't do land acknowledgement, but my version of it, especially that I'm not where you are anyway, is to remind us that coloniality survives colonialism, that it's maintained alive in books, criteria of academic performance, cultural patterns, common sense, self-image of people, aspirations of self, so many other aspects of our modern experience, and we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. And of course, academia and AI are manifestations of this as well. So just a reminder about that. And just so you know, expect interaction today. I'm going to be using Mentimeter. I want to know how you're feeling about AI and your metaphors and things like that. I want to share what I mean by critical when I say critical AI literacy, and I'll share my AI literacy model as well. But I also want to share why I think a caring and compassionate approach is needed. And then I'll give some concrete activities, and I might not have time to go over everything, all the activities and the resources, but you'll have the slides and you can keep them for later. And I always start by saying I'm against AI shaming. I'm a faculty developer, so my main role here at the American University in Cairo is to support other people with their teaching. And this means that I support people who have different teaching philosophies and different attitudes than myself. And I always want to make sure that I'm creating a space where we all also listen to each other and accept that even though we can hold multiple views of AI in the room and even within ourselves, some people are very enthusiastic about AI despite the ethical issues. Other people will reject and resist AI, even though it does have advantages for some people, and to just accept that we still don't know, and we all come at it from a different angle, different disciplines, different background, different experiences, and that everybody is welcome here with their different perspectives. And the other thing is that I love this from Vanessa Andreotti, who talks about, she calls them emergent intelligences instead of artificial intelligence. And she talks about stewardship, right? We can decide how to steward it. So even though right now a lot of AI is stewarded through paradigms of extraction and exploitation, and if we continue this way, we may accelerate our demise, but we may try to think of other ways of guiding AI towards a more relational rationality and rooting it in accountability, kindness, and care, and then in that sense help scaffold humanity to embody those qualities, you know. And she talks about hallucinations not as an output of AI, but that modernity itself creates hallucinations and untruths that we live by, and we deny the real truth, you know. So these are just things to keep in mind, and my slides are open for commenting. So beyond today, I hope someone will send these to you later so you can comment on them later. You can share them with others. You can reuse parts of them. It's a Creative Commons license, but just don't sell them. As long as you attribute me, you can reuse any parts of these slides. And so before I go on, I want to know about your attitudes towards AI. And so I'm going to do a Mentimeter, but I'll just explain very quickly. It's not a Slido, it's a Mentimeter. I just forgot to update that. So how do you see AI? And do you see it in multiple ways? You know, do you think of it as an instrumental? Are you an instrumentalization wizard and you use it for everything, whatever it works? Or are you a playful chaotic and use it as a playground for creative possibilities? Or a skeptical pragmatist, like you're hesitant and cautious, but you use it when it works? Do you see it as a way to make profit? Are you a capitalist extractor? Are you a data guardian? Worried about privacy? Are you a footprint alarmist? Worried about the carbon footprint of AI? Are you in the shutdown brigade? You want to shut it down? Are you a human-centric purist? Are you something else? And so I'm gonna start running Mentimeter now. Just give me a second to open it up. I don't know why it's taking a while, but hopefully it will be ready in a minute. So think about this until the screen shows. It's gonna show the QR code for responding. And for folks who are online, I can also give you a link. Or you can just go to menti.com. That works too. And the code is 75827542. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'll still be able to show you the code, I think, while I'm on the slide. Yeah, here it is. It's still over here, so you can still keep adding yourself there. And you can answer more than one. I think it allows you up to 3. And I will say there's usually a pattern when I do this with a higher ed audience. The skeptical pragmatist is very often the highest one. I think maybe as academics, or people in academia anyway, we value critical thinking a lot. And AI has been around for a while now, so people are starting to have a little bit of skepticism, but also a little bit of pragmatism. Yeah, I'm happy to see that we have footprint alarmists here. There's sometimes this awareness about the environmental impact of AI has been increasing recently, but in the beginning was very, very low. So that's good to see. Okay, so of the 29 people who have joined Mentimeter, 26 have responded, and I'm seeing the skeptical pragmatist definitely at 18 is the highest, 19 now. And playful chaotic tends to come up a lot too, but in this group, the footprint alarmist is a few more. You have data guardians as well. Nobody really much in the shutdown brigade. There are a few who say other, and if you're online, you can type in the chat what that is. If you're in the room, it's a bit harder to collect your perspectives there, but there will be open-ended questions later. And I see that we do have people who are instrumentalization wizards and some human-centric purists. I'll say myself, I am somewhere between skeptical pragmatist, playful chaotic, and human-centric purist, which is very weird, of course, because human-centric purist implies purists, you know? But sometimes that's how I feel, and sometimes it's the other. And I also teach a course on digital literacy and AI literacy, so I can't like not use it at all because that's kind of what I'm teaching. But a lot of times I am teaching about the human centricity aspect of our attitudes towards AI as well. So I go between lots of different spaces there. Okay, and then I don't know if everybody in the room teaches, but whether in your teaching or in your work or in your research, how much do you encourage AI use, discourage AI use, develop AI literacy, or keep changing your mind on what you want to do with AI? And I tried to change the scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree into like how often you do it, but like because I think some of us will have some assessments or assignments that sometimes uh, you encourage AI use sometimes, but discourage AI use in other places. So I'll be interested in how you respond to this one. In case there's anyone online who hasn't voted yet, you can use this link. That's so interesting. I like this type of question because it shows the distribution of the answers as well as sort of the average of what people are saying. So it seems like in terms of encouraging AI use, there's a lot of there's people along the spectrum of how much you encourage it. Whereas with discouraging, it seems like a lot of people are in the middle of how many of you are discouraging AI use. And AI literacy seems to be the one that more people are doing. It's on average more people are doing it, but there's still quite a few who aren't. And they keep changing their mind as there's a few people there, but not as much as those, for example, developing AI literacy. And then I have one more question for you before I start sharing a bit more about my model and my practices. There's about 5 more people who have joined Mentimeter but haven't answered yet. Maybe you can answer the next question. Let's see. It's always good to know where people are in the room. All right. So this one's about metaphors. I love using metaphors. And when ChatGPT first came out, my mom said, "Oh, AI is like fast food." And that was very interesting. She's a medical doctor. She doesn't use technology much. She's never taught. But that was her first reaction to what ChatGPT is doing. I was like, that's a good metaphor, you know, AI being fast food. And always when I talk to students about this, they're like, yeah, so it's quick and it helps you when you're in a rush, but it's not too much of it is not good for you and things like that. So some people said you don't know what's inside it, what the ingredients are, and things like that. Okay, seductive. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good adjective to describe it. Drunk uncle. Oh, I have a friend of mine who, Sam Sharma, who's, I don't know, he's in New York, New York State, who uses drunk uncle a lot. Runaway train, deceptive. Yeah. Confused. You're confused or it's confused. Both, I guess. Double-edged knife. Yeah, I hear double-edged sword a lot. Assistant. That comes up a lot. Candy from a stranger. I love this one. It's so interesting when you use metaphors and they could be ones you've heard and you're not repeating, but or they could be ones that you believe in and they say so much about the attitude, right? The poison apple, power, responsibility, social media, slop, open bar, convenience, Alice's looking glass, So interesting. Some of these are new, like I've never heard of these. Colonialism, I'm happy to see that one. Um, what else we have? Temptation. Yeah. Instant gratification for sure. Pandora's box. I was recently reading about Pandora's box, and we always use it to refer to like creating mayhem or something, but I think the actual story is less chaotic than that, but I'm gonna have to read it properly. The apple, again. The apple, I'm guessing from heaven, like Adam and Eve. Is that what you mean? So interesting. Do we have any more? I love these so much. And I can send these to you guys later after we finish today. So you can go back and look at them again. All right, I'm gonna close up Mentimeter and go back to my slides. Oh, there's one more. Bestie. Yeah. Funnily, high school students, I did this with high school students once, and the one they said was Big Brother. And I said Big Brother as in surveillance. They're like, no, no, my big brother who takes care of me. They're not even aware of like 1984 or George Orwell or whatever. Okay, Barry Bonds, I have no idea what that means. There must be a cultural, some cultural reference that I don't understand. All right, I'm gonna get out of here and go back to my slides now. And thank you for sharing that. I'm going to come back to the metaphors in a minute, but I'm going to share also one of mine that I recently became aware of. So in Cairo, we recently opened up this new Grand Egyptian Museum, and this signage is really good, which is, if you've been to Egypt, the signage used to not be very good in the old museum, so this new museum has really good signage. And I found this goddess called Sekhmet, and she's the goddess of war, destruction, and plague. She was also worshipped as protector of the king and a goddess of healing. And I was like, what? So I contacted an Egyptologist professor at AUC and asked her, how can she be both those things? How can she be both goddess of war and destruction, but also protector of the king and also the goddess of healing? And she said, well, it depends on her mood. And I am thinking, I think that's AI companies are kind of like this, and how we feel about AI is a little bit like this. Some people find AI as a savior. Some people think AI is like going to destroy humanity. And also the same companies that claim to be doing ethical AI, and they go to the conferences for AI for good, I've seen them, are the same companies that use AI to support war crimes at worst, but on a more regular level, often supporting surveillance, and they do exploitation of labor in their processes. So it's important to be able to see all these different sides to AI, both the AI itself and the companies that make the big AI that we all use. And so we were just talking about metaphors, and I have a paper that I co-authored with a couple of people in the US and one of my former students. And it's called Assistant Parrot or Colonizing Loudspeaker, and how you can use ChatGPT metaphors, or I mean AI metaphors generally speaking, for developing critical AI literacies. And what we do is we ask students to say their metaphors, and then we can analyze them in any way we like. But the way I'm going to show you now is one of the diagrams we created, which is how human is the metaphor, and then using Selber's multiliteracies, it's a more functional positive view or a more critical view of AI, or is a more rhetorical, seeing multiple sides. And then we let students plot them, and then we look at the plot and we see where the majority of their metaphors lie. Are they more positive or negative about AI? Are they more anthropomorphizing and making it more like a human or not? So, for example, a genie or a magician can be good and bad. Sometimes genies don't do exactly what you want. Magicians can be black magic, it can be harmful. But then an assistant is usually quite a positive human view of AI. Whereas Fahlawi, if any of you speak Arabic, Fahlawi is an Egyptian term for someone who pretends to know stuff that they don't really know, but they'll tell you anyway. And calculators and autocomplete are very common ones that are non-human that I don't hear as much as I used to. Stochastic parrot is one that reminds us that AI uses calculations and probability, and it just repeats things back, so it's a critical view of it. Two-edged sword is a common rhetorical view of AI. And then some more negative ones are like fast food, plastic surgery, colonizing loudspeakers. I saw someone said colonialism also. And colonizing loudspeaker is one of ours that we made up. But we were also collecting, metaphors that people were using on Twitter and things like that. So anyway, that's just an introduction to that. And the compassionate learning design approach starts for us with listening to students, but I think we need to also be compassionate towards teachers first. And I'm assuming a lot of you yourselves, you teach. So I want to ask you, and we're going to go back to Mentimeter for this, and ask you the next question, which is, what part of your work or teaching brings you the most joy? This is an open-ended question, so. Mentorship, yes. I'm seeing this one, and every time somebody tells me we're going to use AI tutors instead of teaching assistants, I tell them, but they miss out on their relationship, the mentoring relationship they could develop with a TA, which I know not everybody gets to develop, but it's, yeah. Students telling me they learn something meaningful, conversations with students, connecting with students, yes, connecting people with resource information they need to gain agency and competence, interaction with, this sounds like a librarian, that one. Interaction with students, real connections, yeah, so a lot of you, what's really valuable is relationships and connections with humans, social aspects, the collaboration, being able to help and seeing them grow and creating new learning environments, the relationships develop, stories, yes. And the stories about real humans, right? Not generic stories. Observing students engaging with ideas, watching them value learning, connecting with others, reaching goals, when students realize they're learning, that's so beautiful. Thank you all for sharing that. Actualization, yeah. So seeing students actualize. And, maybe even for yourself, self-actualization for you too in your job, I'm assuming. Could be both. Okay. I know there's more people connected to the Mentimeter, but I'll just move on in the interest of time. And what's something you're grieving due to the existence of AI that you have or haven't named out loud yet? True creative spirit. Yeah. Because I think when people just jump to AI right away, then they're not giving themselves time to create themselves, right? So do something really creative. Students' writing abilities. Yeah. They think AI is going to write it better and they don't even try sometimes. Letting them grow and struggle. Struggle. I'm missing the struggle. I'm missing them understanding the value of struggle. Isolation, critical thinking, access to quick answers without process, critical creative thinking, easy way out. Critical thinking is coming up a lot. Present connection, yeah. Close reading, oh my God, it's so difficult to convince them to actually read something rather than use AI to summarize it. Knowing how to find things, yeah, they'll just jump to, in the same way they used to jump to Wikipedia and stuff. But yeah, back burner brain work. Afraid that my answer won't be as good as AI's. Oh, human-centeredness, having to police. Yeah, this is something so many people are like, this is not what I signed up for, you know? The bias, yeah, the reproduction of bias, persistence with hard thinking that people are not doing anymore. They'll think a little bit and then jump to AI or jump to AI without even trying to think first. Human dialogue, yeah. When I hear people talk about using AI for therapy or talking to it instead of talking to their spouse, and I'm thinking, this is I'm so worried about our human relationships going forward. Less human art as corporations use AI to replace human work, yeah, including artwork and writing. It's a little bit disgusting. I saw something recently, generally speaking, I feel nauseated by AI created artwork. But recently I saw something that I didn't realize was AI and I thought it was very cute. And then I was very disappointed to find out that it was made with AI. But it must have had a lot of human intervention to make it that good. Like usually AI stuff doesn't come out like that good right away. So I want to dig deeper into that one actually. People are missing originality and human interaction. Yeah. All right. Thank you all. So, and belief in human intelligence. I think, yeah, the fact that we're always like asking if something is AI generated as soon as we see something that's a little bit suspicious, and it's just a belief that humans can't do better. And I think that's a belief I hope we don't let go of it. Yeah, we had no say in it existing. That's true. But I think the AI inevitability narrative is very problematic. It makes us feel like we had no say in it existing and we have no say in whether we use it or not. But we always have a say in whether we use it or not. We just have no say in whether our students will use it or not because we can't control them. but we do have a say in how we influence and shape the way they approach it and their attitudes. In the same way that social media existed anyway, and we never signed up for it. It's just that social media wasn't doing their homework for them. But I mean, there was Chegg and there was Course Hero. There were all kinds of other things that were interrupting education, and we had no control over whether students used them. But the inevitability narrative around AI is so strong, and is just really good at doing homework or some stuff, some kinds of homework. Looks like it's doing it. And it makes it very tempting for students to use. Data security or how students understand it. Yeah, I notice younger generations are less and less careful about their data security and data privacy. And that's something within our, within what we can be doing in higher education is helping develop their critical literacies about that as well. Okay, so I'm gonna come back to this question in a minute. And I think, I just want to remember to be compassionate for teachers. And I remember the beginning when ChatGPT came out, we thought this would be what we would be doing. It's just telling students, this is how you're permitted to use AI, this is how you're not permitted to use AI, and you need to take my permission for these things. But I think what we're realizing is students don't necessarily follow this, and you need to have a longer conversation with them about why, and also they still might not do what you're asking them to do, and you need to verify. But I think it's also important to start from why do students use AI as a shortcut sometimes or as a form of unauthorized help if we've asked them not to? And this is a thing that we need to talk to them about and understand. And I would ask you this question normally on Mentimeter, but just to go a bit faster, I had this conversation with a former student of mine, and sometimes they don't have time. Sometimes, as you said earlier, they've lost confidence in their ability to do better. So AI seems to be doing it better, so they think it's better. They don't think they have a writing voice, or they don't believe in their own voice, so AI seems to be doing it, or they don't care about the thing we're asking them to do, and AI can do it, so why not? And they'll use their time for something they do care about. But sometimes it's because we aren't offering enough support for them, or sometimes it's because our institution is creating a situation for us where we have more students than we have time to care for, or we don't have enough teaching assistants, or all kinds of other institutional barriers like having to get a certain grade in order to declare a major, keeping a GPA for a scholarship, and they think that AI is going to help them have that edge. And so they go to that. They're finding a form of support that's going to save them time and looks like it's doing a good job, although for the most part it isn't, but it's getting better at it, or they're getting better at using it, and they're being strategic about it. And so we sort of need to figure out what it is that's really important that we're teaching, and how to make sure that they're learning what they need to learn anyway. I built community in my classes from the very beginning, and towards like the first big reading that we need to do, we do a lot of small readings, but it's the big readings that they tend not to do when they use AI with it. And so I have a conversation after, if I feel like a lot of them have used AI in ways that haven't been helpful, we sit in a circle and I say, let's do playful confessions. Everybody's going to share how they used AI for this assignment. You've already gotten your grade, so use it. Telling me how much you used AI is not going to affect your grade. And so some of them will say, I really read it, I didn't use AI at all. Some of them will say, it was an annotation assignment, right? So they'd say, oh, I let AI choose the quote, I let AI reflect on the quote, and that's what I submitted, and I tell them that's why you got a bad grade. It's not because you used AI, it's because you used it badly and you didn't do any of the work. Whereas other students do all kinds of very different things, and it's so interesting to listen to them and understand how they're thinking about it and how they're using it. So I found that some of them will read the article and choose their own quotes, but they'll ask AI to help them reflect more deeply. Or they won't read the article and they'll let AI pick some quotes for them, but they will do the reflection themselves. So it's not the way they used to read or the way we want them to read, but it's not always as bad as just letting AI do all the work. And you can tell when someone has done nothing and just let AI do everything, but they've done, and the difference between that and the ones who've done the work. And what happens is the ones who've done real work, when you're having a class discussion about the reading, it shows. And the ones who haven't have nothing to say about the reading because they haven't actually read it, or even probably even read what AI has said. And sometimes I bring up the quotes of things they said in their assignments on the board, and I say, could you explain what this means? And obviously it's using very sophisticated language that they're not capable of as non-native speakers of English, who aren't, they're fluent, but they're not that fluent. And they have nothing to say because they don't understand what they wrote because they didn't write it. So, and then after that, it gets better. usually after this phase in the class. And I also talk to them about the cake analogy. And the cake analogy is useful both for teachers and for students. And the question I always ask people is, do you bake? And do you bake from scratch? And I ask them to think about your class. Are you teaching people to become bakers? And therefore they need to bake from scratch. They need to know how to make a gluten-free cake. They need to make new forms of cake, and they have to do it themselves. But if you are teaching a cake decorating class, then if you watch the Netflix show called Nailed It, they use cake mix because they want to spend all the time on the decoration, right? And so if you're teaching cake decorating, you don't mind if they use cake mix. Cake mix is not like a horrible thing. It's just a shortcut so that you can focus on the important thing. If you're a baker, usually you wouldn't use cake mix. But if you're learning to do cake decorating, there's no need to worry about the cake mix. You're focusing on the cake decorating part. And then you can add your little touch into the cake mix as well. But you need to be a good baker first also to be able to do that, right? But then what happens with students sometimes is they give you a Twinkie. So they've taken something out of AI directly and not added anything to it. And then they're all very bland and similar and vanilla and maybe suitable for a kiddie birthday party, but not suitable for the assignment, right? And then the other thing is if your students are learning to be wedding planners, then they could just commission someone else to do the cake, like buy it from another baker, right? So it's always the question for the faculty member is like, what's your learning outcome that people need to be able to do without AI? And what is the extra thing, that extraneous thing that they can save time by using AI for and then doing it themselves? So for example, in my class, when they're blogging, I want them to do their own reflections, but I don't mind if they correct their grammar with AI because I'm not teaching grammar. I'm not going to correct their grammar for them, honestly. I don't have time for this. But I want them to write good grammar. I just want to make sure it's their ideas. And, I don't teach them graphic design. So if they want to put a picture on the blog, they want it to be AI generated, they want to get it from somewhere else, whatever it is, as long as it has a license that they can use it, that's fine, So it's just about thinking about these things, like which aspects does it make sense to use AI and which doesn't? But it has to be like a dialogue with the students and they need to be convinced themselves. This is not going to stop everybody from misusing it, but having that conversation helps them reflect on what am I losing when I use AI instead of doing the assignment the way the teacher expected me to. And this compassionate learning design model is about giving students agency. So there's a difference between I decide for the students which AI tool they can use and how much they can use it. That's the two. But you can give them a bit more agency where you give them a bit more choice. Like we make a decision for them that it's this tool or that tool, but they still just decide between what we offer. This is like when an institution has their own AI tool, which for privacy reasons is a good idea. And then they say you can only use one of these two. But then we could co-create the guidelines for AI use with our students. Or we could actually let students have these conversations amongst themselves and then check in with us. Or we can just let them decide for themselves. And what I do in my classes is I build their critical AI literacy. And then towards the end in the project, I say, you can use AI wherever you want in this project or reject it wherever you want in the project, but just reflect in the end on where it was helpful and where it wasn't. And I realized that different students need to use it or get help from it in different ways, that none of them are related to the main learning outcome anyway, so it's never a problem usually. But some of them need help with the grammar, some of them need help with brainstorming, some of them need help with something else, and some of them hate it. Some of them hate what it brings out, and then they try it, they don't like it, they reject it. But the thing is, for me, what they need to do as they graduate from our universities is that when they go into the job market and they go into life, they need to be able to make informed decisions about when to use AI and how, what its limitations are, and the impact of biases and hallucinations, and to be able to review it. So they need to develop that judgment, and this is a safe space to develop that judgment rather than to follow what someone else tells you, and that's it. So my critical AI literacy model starts with not just skepticism as critical, but also critical theory, critical pedagogy, an awareness of social justice issues, and cultivating the disposition to address social justice issues and power issues within AI, and always questioning the inevitability narrative. AI in education is not necessarily beneficial or transformative. It's contested, controversial. We need to keep having dialogue around it in order to achieve any possible benefits and avoid the risks, right? So I would always start with understanding how AI works, and I do this in a playful way, which I'll show you. Recognizing the inequalities and biases reproduced by AI, examining ethical issues And all of this before we start talking about how do you craft effective prompts. And I don't like prompt engineering because engineering is precise and prompt writing is not very precise. So get more crafty, I think, than engineering. And then they need to be able to assess appropriate use, like where might AI be useful for me, where might AI be harmful, given everything else they know about it. And so there's a website that Harvard has done as part of their Meta Lab projects called the AI Pedagogy Project, and I'm part of it. And there's resources on it for different types of things to develop AI literacy. So there are things, opportunities to learn how AI works, activities you can do with students to help them become more aware of inequalities and biases, or kinds of debates around the ethical issues, right? And also things to help them think about appropriate use. And the cake analogy is one way to think about appropriate use as well. And then prompt engineering is also available on this site, right? So understanding how generative AI works, has anybody ever played this game called Quick Draw? It's a game by Google that lets you doodle things. And as you do this, you start to understand how machine learning works. This is a kind of machine learning called pattern recognition, but because it's visual, it's so easy to see the kinds of biases that are baked into it. So for example, I always say this to my students, the hospital expects you to have a cross. If it tells you to draw a hospital, always expects you to have a cross on it. But in Islamic countries, we don't have a cross, we have a crescent. But because they know that they're playing with a Western tool, they keep reproducing that bias themselves. And the tool, because the majority of people who play it will do this. And this is a way to sort of explain how AI learns from the data and also how the outputs can be biased. Dalia, do I have like 5 more minutes? Is that how much I have? Or do I have more time? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys are muted, so I have no idea. 10 minutes? I don't know, I'm seeing two hands. Okay, you can stop me whenever you have to, okay? The other thing is for them to understand that the way AI works, generative AI, is that hallucinations are a normal thing. This is the way AI works. And some people call it mirage rather than hallucination because it is just generating things. Sometimes it'll be correct, sometimes it won't be. 10 minutes, all right, perfect, thanks. All right, and then this issue of recognizing inequalities and biases, for me, I spend a lot of time making sure students understand the concept of AI of bias, right? An unconscious bias, and in the case of AI, implicit bias. Because a lot of AI tools have been trained, at least ChatGPT is trained not to be offensive, but if you ask a question indirectly, it will show its hidden biases, right? And understanding the statistical reasoning that AI uses always tends towards the average, and that's why it reproduces colonial thinking. Because even if it has data from outside the Western world, the majority of it is still from the Western world. And of course, everything else is marginalized, but also in anything that has perspective, it has a more Western white male perspective. And to know that bias in AI has caused harm in the past, in recruitment, racism, criminal justice, racism, facial recognition, reproducing racism and sexism, right? And this has been AI forever, so it's never been fixed completely, right? Other kinds of AI as well. I'm going to skip over these quotes a little bit so that we can. I want to share this terrorism story. This is research that I've done, where if you ask an AI tool, is a person from this country or that country more likely to be a terrorist? All the AI tools will refuse to answer this question and tell you you're stereotyping. But if you ask all the AI tools, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, you ask them, define terrorism and give me 5 examples, inevitably 3 or 4 of those examples are going to be Islamic terrorism. So there's an implicit bias against Islam as a Islamic terrorism as terrorism, even though there are other groups that do terrorism. And it's an implicit bias in the AI, but it won't do it directly. There's also this research that's showing that the more Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic the culture is, the more likely ChatGPT's response is going to be similar. And the more culturally distant you are from broadly the US, of course, the US is not homogeneous, but broadly, the US is considered Western educated, industrialized, and democratic. And the way people respond to this particular survey called the Human Values Survey in the US and Canada and Britain and Australia and Germany is quite similar to what ChatGPT will say. But if you're from a culture that's very different, like Egypt or Pakistan or Jordan, or Indonesia or Nigeria, your response is less likely to look like what ChatGPT produces. And this has explained something really important to me. It's explained to me why I come across ChatGPT's biases and AI biases more frequently than people who live, who are white Western people, generally speaking. The other thing that I always talk to students about is accountability versus automation and what it means to have a black box thing produce outputs for you that you can't explain and it can't explain, or it pretends to explain, but it's not really very accurate in explaining. And what will happen when we keep doing this, and what do we lose? And I think there's a lot of times we talk about the ways AI can support people with disabilities, but a lot of times we do it in ways that reproduces neuronormativity and ableism. So when we talk about people on the autism spectrum using AI to sound like a neuronormative person, this is problematic because it should be our responsibility to just accept them the way they are and support them to be more more able to interact with the world and make the world itself, reduce the barriers in the world itself. And for example, people using AI to produce alternative text for people who are visually impaired is like reducing your responsibility to do that yourself and putting on an AI that a lot of times people with visual impairment tell me the AI produced alternative text is too long to be helpful and has too many details. We need a human, discriminating human, to select what's important, to tell us what they need us to see in the image that they created, and not an AI tool that just tells us everything, right? And we need to think about problems related to the AI use for surveillance and policing, AI detectors being one of those. I won't have time to show this video, but it's a really cute video explaining oppression using Legos. But I'm gonna share the next slide, which is the ways AI can reproduce oppression. So ideological oppression and the implicit bias in the outputs is just epistemic injustice and reproducing white Western ways of thinking, colonialist ways of thinking. It can create internalized oppression when non-native speakers think it writes better than them and they lose their own voice. And also just people whose English is just not standard English, right? Even if they're native speakers. And then it can reproduce interpersonal oppression if we're using AI detectors and the conversations around that, because it makes us lose trust. Some of you talked about this. Or AI is a censor that prevents you from asking certain questions because it thinks it's offensive. And then it can reproduce institutionalized oppression if we're using AI for grading or learning analytics, because these are based on norms. If we use AI in the admission or recruitment processes, because it can reproduce biases against minorities, facial recognition racism. And just generally speaking, when you think about it, who has access to which tools in which languages and so on. Some other ethical issues that I think are worth looking at. This is eCampus Ontario. They have a great one about the harm considerations, including the carbon footprint that some of you are concerned about, extractive industries, exploitation of labor, both in the human data sets, like whose data is being used to train AI, whether it's art or language, but also the people who are filtering the AI in order to reduce the offense in them. These people have been suffering mentally and are not being paid or compensated for this. The privacy issues, the copyright issues, and just like who has access and the bias again. And of course, not large language models directly, but AI tools in general in the same companies that make them. There's a lot of genocide that gets supported. There's a lot of eugenics in the background behind the reasoning behind why they're creating these AI tools. If you listen to them, and there are papers about something called TESCREAL, which I'm going to mention, about techno supremacy and how they think about AI and the artificial general intelligence. And a lot of that comes from a eugenics background. So we have to be very careful with where this might be going. And then this crafting effective prompts, there used to be a link for self-assessing your ability to create prompts. I think people are getting better at this, and students especially, so I'm not too worried about it. There's a lot of free courses on it. And I usually model it a lot for students, and each of us gives tips and we all improve on it. And this thinking about whether AI really works for what we think it works for, there's a lot of narrative on saving time that doesn't really save time. So we need to always question whether it's actually doing what we think it's doing or what we imagine, or what the narrative is around doing it. Does it really save labor, save time? And you can think about times that generative AI has worked for you very well recently, has been helpful, and also times that has like really failed. And we talk about the concept of a jagged intelligence, like sometimes it's really impressive, sometimes really bad. And the automation paradox, that sometimes we get used to using machines and then we struggle when they fail. and then we've never learned the thing. And this is why higher education is a space where we need to make sure they have the foundation they need, even if it's going to be automated in the future, you know? So I do an AI in your profession assignment. My students come from different fields, and I ask them to interview a professor and a professional in their field to find out how AI is being used there, but also to come at it with a critical eye and dig deeper into exactly how are you using it, how does it feel, when does it work well. I also teach students about using the appropriate tool for the appropriate thing. So there are particular research tools that are good for AI tools that are good for doing research that use real peer-reviewed papers and don't hallucinate as much. I still don't like them very much, but they're better than using generic ChatGPT, like things like SciSpace or Google Notebook LM and so on. And just let them know about this epidemic of fake research and fake citations and fake peer reviews and all these fake research things that are going to become problematic because it's going to be difficult for us to check against them for fake things because they're on the internet now and published, right? And think about where AI should not be used in your field, even if it becomes good at it. What's a high risk thing that we need to be able to explain and be accountable for? This is the last thing I'm going to share, and then I'll be ready to take questions. So the learning equity matrix is how I approach what I'm going to do about AI in my class, is to ask myself, does it improve learning? Does it harm learning? Is it equitable, or are some people disadvantaged by it? So, and you can put whatever you want here. I think critical AI literacy is important for everybody's learning. I think having authentic assessments where they do things themselves and then do that in the assessment is equitable because then there's no AI place for AI in that. Transparency and agency, encouraging them to take the agency and be transparent about how they're using AI, I believe is kind of equitable, although not everybody is going to be as comfortable with it. And it's good for their learning anyway to learn to be transparent and agentic. Paper-based exams feel equitable in the sense that you can make sure that people didn't use AI if it's something you want to prevent, but also paper-based exams are themselves inequitable because of time and the format, and some people get anxious and so on. But hopefully people who need help get accommodations, but there will always be people who have undiagnosed learning difficulties. I think using AI to give feedback is something that if students do it, I'm okay with it to do it for themselves, but I'm not okay with faculty doing it. It can reproduce a lot of bias and things like that. I don't think it helps learning very much. I think AI detectors, they're harmful for community and trust and learning, and they're not equitable because they tend to, again, be biased against certain types of writing, especially by non-native speakers. I think requiring AI in assessment as a way to learn about AI is good, but it can be inequitable because some students have access to paid tools and some don't. And I don't think that unconditional use of AI, it's some fields do this. I think it could be problematic because they need to reflect a little bit about what's happening with AI, you know. And again, oral verification is useful, but it can be inequitable also because some people become anxious with oral assessment. So it's something to think about. So just think about who gets advantaged and disadvantaged and how does it affect my class. And you can do one of these on your own. All right. I have a lot of resources here that you can look at, and I'll just go to Mentimeter and ask you about your key takeaways, and I'll be ready to take questions. Just gonna open up on this slide. All right, what's the key takeaway for you from today? And then I'll have a slide for questions, but you can also, if you want to collect questions from the room or write them in the chat on Zoom, okay, I can take them that way too. Be more mindful of how I approach AI with my students. Helpful framing of critical AI. Love the cake analogy. Critical, critical thinking or critical always have been. Yeah, a lot I need to learn. Dilemma, guardrails, and boundaries support learning versus student agency. Thanks for resources. Thank you. Safe space, students can develop judgment on how and when to use AI. Yeah. And this a part of it is just a lot of modeling as well. But one of the funny things that happens when you're modeling AI is that it behaves differently each time. So sometimes it does surprising things, like you don't expect that that's what's going to happen. But that's also a learning moment, so it's cool. A lot of good resources available to help support AI decision making. Excited to dive in more. Need to continue these critical conversations. Yes. Okay. Paying attention, reflecting on issues of equity and learning. Yes. Yeah. Unrealistic to expect AI serves equally to all cultures. Yeah. And I was telling somebody once, I was with people from Kenya who were talking about developing local language models. And of course, you can do that. And there are Arabic language models, for example. But the problem is still, if you create a Kenyan language model, it will still represent the dominant majority of Kenyan society. It will likely represent more male, privileged, educated perspectives because that's probably what exists in writing and is used to train an LLM anyway. Or if there are like multiple languages in a country, it's probably mostly in the dominant language and not in the minority languages. So, and there was a slide that I went through very quickly that had a quote about indigenous knowledge. And, a lot of indigenous knowledge is considered sacred. And if you train AI on it, you lose your sovereignty over that knowledge because you never know what generative AI is going to do with it, right? Critical generative AI work requires actually criticizing Gen AI, whereas some in the field are critical in name only. Yeah, I agree. I actually see a lot of people who say, oh, there are all these ethical issues and we need to deal with them, but AI is wonderful and we're going to use it. And there's no pause at every one of the ethical issues. And it's okay to find ways that AI is useful for you, but the fact that people don't pause enough to be critical is very worrying for me. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the next slide in case people want to ask questions through Mentimeter instead of out loud.
Do we have questions in there? Sorry.
All right, awesome.
Thank you so much. This was both instructive and inspiring, and I think and thought provoking in terms of our own thinking about how we use AI, how we should be using AI, or thinking about using AI with students. And I wanted to open it up for questions from the room or from Zoom. If you're on Zoom, you can just type it in. You can also put it on Menti or just raise your hand here. Andy.
I guess I have a question of whether it seems like you're advocating for very much at the level of the classroom really deciding what the kind of boundaries and frameworks that happen are versus kind of a more institutional approach, which I think has kind of been. I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about like those tensions because I think there are a lot of sort of push towards more broader institutional approaches, and yet I think this learning ecology kind of makes sense.
Yes. So this is a very interesting question, and I think most institutions that I know of give a lot of agency to the instructors to decide what to do in their classes, and it drives everybody crazy because everybody's like, give us more guidance. And as one of the leaders in my institution in this, I'm part of the AI task force. I'm on the front line of teaching what to do with this, both talking to the institution and the individuals. There isn't something that I believe right now exists that we can do at an institutional level that's very concrete that will make everybody happy because we don't have enough experience to really know if it's the right thing to do. And I'm not going to push something down someone's throat when I'm not really sure what I'm doing, So, like, we know for sure that AI detectors are unreliable. So my department, the Center for Learning and Teaching, discourages people from using it, and we explain why, but our academic integrity committee still allows it as one of the pieces of evidence that someone may have used AI, unauthorized. And so we can't even agree on that. And we can't make people not use AI detectors in the same way we can't make students not use AI. And so some of the things we're trying to do at the institutional level is, okay, make sure the institution is providing one form of AI that is private. So if someone does need to put some data on it, that we know it's not going back to the companies and it doesn't have security risks. Trying to improve people's critical AI literacy, trying to make sure that thesis research, there's a way to be transparent about AI use, but still they put up something about how to be transparent about AI use, but the teachers or the professors who are supervising the theses aren't advising students from the beginning what their departmental policy is about AI use, right? And definitely across disciplines, it's really hard. I think within each discipline or department, sometimes people can agree on how they want to approach AI, and sometimes they can't. And it's a very polarizing topic. And so my institution's guidelines are instructors can do whatever they want, but they have to let their students know what it is they want because the students won't know. And the students have to assume that every professor is different and ask if they can use AI or not in that thing. And we're just encouraging transparency. And we're holding co-design sessions between educators and students and staff about the kinds of things that they're concerned with. And like we learn, there are a lot of faculty who use AI in ways we never told them not to, but the students are saying we don't want feedback from AI. We don't want assessments that are designed with AI. They notice it, they critique it. It makes them angry because they pay money to be in the institution, things like that. But so I think it's evolving and emerging, and making a concrete policy goes through a lot of processes of approvals and Senate and things like that. And by the time that happens, the AI will have changed, our attitudes towards it will have changed. I don't think it's time to get too concrete yet. I know it's been 3 years, but I don't think we're there yet. That's how I feel.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question, though. I should maybe make it explicit why I talk on the class level in future, because I think the institutional level I don't think we're there.
Any last question before we break? We will share the slides, and thank you so much for that resource. I know that you had to run through some of the slides, and I was, reading quickly what was on some of them, and I think it's really, really useful information. So we will make those available. There are all sorts of useful links in there. Really, really appreciate this. I think we've been having conversations about AI in the school for a while now, trying to think about where we are, how we're thinking about it, and this has been really helpful in informing these conversations and also our own individual thinking about this. And we will also share the link that you have. So thank you so much.
Everybody.
And we will see everyone on the 28th. Right? Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
It was a real rush hour.
So much.
Stuff they said. No, yeah, you're right. This.